The hospital I worked at has a strange closet. It's located in the basement at the end of a hall. It's always locked. None of the keys in any department can unlock it. When it does get opened, it has to be documented in a book. Officially, it's only been opened twice. Once, when the graveyard housekeeper saw it flying off the hinges, slamming open and shut. Maintenance chalked it up to a wiring issue with a wheelchair button. Everyone knows that a closet in the basement has never had a wheelchair button. Twice, when maintenance removed the door from the hinges so the fire department could check the sprinklers. When they arrived, the door was backed on the frame, locked up tight. They never did check those sprinklers. Since then, many rumors, theories, and stories have come out of that closet. Just about everyone in housekeeping, kitchen, and maintenance, as well as some doctors and nurses. Even a few patients have had encounters with this closet. My first encounter happened last night. I was working an evening shift, doing my regular routine, taking out the garbage and recycling. I've done this shift a lot, so I was familiar with the hall and the closet that lived at the end of it. It never did anything strange with me, and I always thought the stories were just that. That was until I saw the door handle jiggle. I shook my head confused. It was an ordinary closet. The handle couldn't jiggle, but it did. This time, more aggressively. The whole door started to shake in its frame while I stood there frozen. Nothing like this should be happening. Someone must be trapped inside. I reached out and grabbed the handle. The door fell silent. "What the hell?" I whispered and pulled the handle down. Locked. I shook my head again, trying to make any sense of this situation. Maybe it was the wires, I said to myself. I continued with my work duties, but I couldn't shake what I saw with that door. I dumped the last bit of cardboard and headed back inside. I passed the door. It was wide open. All of a sudden, from up the hall, I heard the frantic slam of footsteps rushing and the squeaking and the buckling of trolley wheels. Two nurses whipped around the corner, pushing a trauma victim full speed towards me. I leaped out the way, narrowly dodging the gurney. It was like I was invisible to the nurses. They made no gestures or calls for me to move. I picked myself up and looked back. They pulled the stretcher into the closet and closed the door behind them. I put my hand on the handle. Butterflies danced in my stomach, and the hairs stood on my neck. I pressed down, and the handle started to move. The door was unlocked. I flung open the door, expecting to see organs being harvested or cannibalism. I saw nothing but an empty closet, not even a shelf in this bare room. No sign a stretcher was even in this room. I closed the door. Oops, left the lights on. I squeezed the handle again. It's locked. I couldn't believe what just happened to me, but protocol says I have to document it. I opened the basement binder and flipped to the very back where we kept the encounter sheet specifically for the door. I wrote the date and time it happened, followed by my signature. There should have been only 3 encounter dates, but there was a 4th. The encounter is dated a week from today, but no one has signed it. I'm an ER nurse. I had an old lady come in by ambulance near death. She was a DNR, so we weren't going to do much for her. She didn't have any family that we could find. The hospital was full, so we had to keep her in the ER for the night. Again, she was near death. When you've seen enough people die, there's no mistaking it, and she was almost there. Barely responsive, pale, cool. Breaths were really irregular. Heart rate was up and down too. We just turned the lights down and kept an eye on her monitor, basically waiting for her to die. About an hour later, she's standing at the door of her room. She had gotten up and put on all of her clothes. We were all like, what the hell? One of the nurses went to check on her and she said she was hungry. Not knowing really what to make of things, we got her a chair, a bedside table, and went to the cafeteria and got her a tray of food. The lady sat there, ate all of her food, talked with the staff a little. After about an hour, she told her nurse that she was tired and wanted to lie back down. We helped her back into bed, and within 30 minutes, she was dead. Not exactly paranormal, but in 22 years in busy-ass inner-city ERs, it's the weirdest thing I've seen. I was a new nurse at our hospital. and only been working there a couple of months. I had brought a patient of mine to day surgery from the ER for an endoscopy, and they called back down and asked me to bring her family up because she only spoke Italian and not enough English, and they needed someone to consent for the procedure. After dropping them off, I walked past the waiting room to head back down to the hall to the elevators. I took the back way to get to the ER, and the hallways are all deserted. It used to be the pediatric wing of the hospital, but that is all shut down for years, and the rooms are just empty and full of broken equipment and beds and crap. As I reached the old nurses' station at the T-junction between the pediatric hallway and the hallway that goes to the elevators, I saw a little girl standing across from the nurses' station further down the hall. She had a big pigtails, was wearing a brown dress, white shoes, holding a teddy bear. I thought perhaps she was a family member who had walked away from the day surgery waiting room. I was concerned that she would go into one of the rooms and get hurt or lost, so I said, "Hey little girl, what are you doing? You don't need to be over there. You're going to get hurt." And I walked around the nursing station to go grab her hand and bring her back. I shit you not, she vanished as I got about 15 feet away from her. Every hair on my body stood up straight, and I turned and ran like a bat out of hell down to the elevator. I pounded that button for what seemed like an eternity until the elevator got to the floor. As I got back to the ER, I walked up to the nurse's desk, white as a sheet, and one of the older nurses looked at me and said, "Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?" I remember babbling like an idiot as I tried to tell them what happened. After listening to me for a moment or two, the nurse said, "Oh, you saw the little girl ghost? She's been around here for years." And I remember saying, "Well, thanks for telling me about it before this." Apparently, the ghost has even been seen down in the ER, ducking in and out of patient rooms and peeking around curtains. My wife worked up on the 7th floor, and she said that one time on nights, a whole row of patient rooms started yelling about a little girl that was running around in the rooms. I guess she gets around. I worked for a short time as an EMT who spent most of my time with transfers. I had a regular who was an older woman that I took to a dialysis center across town frequently. One day, she was being moved, and I was in the back with her. She looked under the weather, so I asked what was wrong, and she said a man in purple had been visiting her. I asked if he was a relative or a technician, and she shook her head. She said the man would sit next to her during the dialysis and stroke her hair. Thinking this was strange, I asked the center techs about such a person, and no one had seen or remembered such a person. Visitors weren't really a thing at this center anyway, so I assumed the patient was imagining it. Well, one day, we're actually heading to pick her up, and on the way into the parking lot, I see through the window something that chills my heart to think about. It sent shivers up my spine at the time too, like I immediately recognized it. But I swear to God, I saw a man in purple scrubs standing in one of the big windows watching us drive in. And when we pulled out of sight to go to the pickup door, we walked in to see a bunch of techs rushing to my transfer patient. The woman had just suffered a heart attack, and we were unable to revive her. Even at the hospital she was rushed to. None of the techs in that place wore purple scrubs. I worked at an LTC facility as a night shift aide about 14 years ago. I worked at a hall I had never been on before. It was like 1 a.m. and I saw an elderly guy walk out of the room down the hallway and leave the facility. I went to that room and the resident was awake. Asked her who she was talking to, and she told me her husband always came to visit her late at night. I went to ask the other aide on the floor about it, and they told me that the resident was 102 years old and her husband had been dead for like 20 to 30 years. Swear on my life that it was an actual person leaving that hall. I could even describe his outfit and hat. Needless to say, I didn't work that hall much anymore.